Hambini fans, and welcome to another episode of the Shite and Sarcasm Engineering Show, presented by yours truly, everyone's favourite 5-year-old, me. Right, in today's episode, we've got what is possibly the most expensive wheel set. I think it is actually the most expensive wheel set I've ever had on this show. These are a set of Aviav Aldo wheels. The expense is one thing. Another two key points, they are made in South Korea, which is unusual because the vast majority of wheels that come on this show and worldwide are made within a 20-mile radius of Xiamen in China. And the final point, which is, I can't even believe I'm saying this, they are $3,500 plus taxes. Right, I've had these wheels since the very start of 2023, so it's coming up to 2.5 years with them. Now, these are probably maybe the fourth or fifth set that have come with this sort of wavy profile, but this is very unique, and I'll come on to that in a minute. I have had some on and off dialogue with the guy called Charles, who runs the company, and another chap called Ryan. But to be honest, the communication has been somewhat tricky. And to be fair, I don't think it's a lack of effort on both parties. I think there's just something wrong with my Google Mail because it seems to reject their emails for whatever reason. But I'm just saying that as full disclosure. And the other one is I didn't pay for these wheels, they just sent them. So these are the wheels. This one is actually the back wheel. These rims are made in South Korea. Well, it says they're made in South Korea. The spokes look like they are made by a Chinese company or Taiwanese company, Stren, which is a reputable company. They are not to be sniffed at whatsoever. The rim itself, and I don't think this shows up very well on camera, is okay around here, but there's various bits of like stone chips around the periphery and across, you know, the middle of it where stones have hit it. In fact, there's another one there, a couple there, just where the tyre is sort of given way, and then you've got like an impact piece of damage. But overall, given I've had them for 2.5 years, and you know, my brother's had them, and you know, various other people have used them. In fact, you can see a big dint there. They've handled themselves pretty well. There's not really, you know, apart from the cosmetics, mechanically, they're okay, given the amount of abuse they've had. The nipples, they are exposed, so you can adjust them on the fly. I haven't had to adjust them. Tension has been pretty good in all that time. And then, yeah, we come to the Stren bladed spokes. So they're carbon. And I've got the test set for this wheel, so you can download that. The hub is extremely loud, so I'm just going to get my mic off and then play it back. I don't know where that hub comes from because I've not taken it apart fully, but it's got some interesting design features, especially in the front. This is the other side of the rear wheel. Now, there's a couple of design features which are, I don't know whether you would call them a standout or not, but they're certainly different to other manufacturers. The big one for me is the position of the bearing. It's set in quite a bit more than, you know, the likes of, I was going to say H-Works. So this cap that comes on the end is a bit longer, so that bearing sits slightly deeper. The wheel is cross-laced, so you have 10 spokes on this side and 10 spokes on the other. Going towards the rim, if we talk about the cosmetics, this is like a sticker that's been stuck on and then lacquer's been put over it. This feels like it's etched, and it's an Ansys logo, which I'll talk about later on, but they are a CFD company, quite a famous or well-known CFD company, and it says Ansys CFD simulated on there. And then over here it says Chevron Kammtail Technology, and that refers to this wavy profile. This is the front wheel, and that is almost 700, so it's 693. Do the rim width, well, the rim width is, or depth is 50 mil-ish. the width is around about 28 mil, and then the internal is about 22. The maximum pressure you can put on this wheel, which is the slightly narrower variant of what they have, is 110 psi. This is the front wheel, and it has a few design bits that are different to the bulk of the wheels you'll see outside. The end caps, first of all, has a secondary rubber O-ring seal around the outside, so it's to try and stop dirt getting in there. The support for the tube that's inside, so there's a tube in there, there's a spacer tube to keep the bearings separated and to fix the preload. That sits on part of this lip. So the bearing sits closest to where my little finger is, and then a bit further in is where the tube spacer sits. Now, this is the front wheel, and this has been problematic. So after about 7 or 8 months of receiving these, I took these across Switzerland into Italy. So I went over the Nerfenen Pass, which is in the southern part of Switzerland. I think it's the second highest or third highest paved road in Europe. On the way up, no issues whatsoever. On the way down, then I started to get what I thought was, well, it was speed wobble. So I was going down, and then me being a bit of a wimp, I don't really go much above 30, 40 miles an hour, which is enough for me, and the wheel was starting to wobble. Now, I initially thought it was because of the aerodynamics of the wheel, and then I sort of parked it to one side. Got back, and then left the wheels for a while, and then came back to them and to put them on the bike. I put them in the steam cleaner at our work to clean all the gunge and muck off. And then I noticed this. Hear that? I thought something was broken inside the wheel. So I took the rim tape off and then had a look. Couldn't find anything. All the spokes were still working, or still had tension on them. So I was trying to, at a bit of a loss as to figure out what it was. So I then got the endoscope or the boroscope out. So what I've got here are the insides of the wheel. Now I'm moving the boroscope in and out, and you can see this white stuff around the outside. And it looks like it's part of the molding process. You see it's quite consistent on one half of the rim. Now, as I was riding, this has basically become out of balance. Now, unfortunately, I didn't check the out of balance when I got them accurately enough, because I initially put this onto the balancing machine and I thought our balancing machine was broken because the readings were so high, and then we had to get it recalibrated as a result. Now, you might think, well, you'd be checking rotors and things all the time. The crux of it is when you put something that's very lightweight on, it's actually more difficult to balance. So the usual, 900 kilos of turbine rotor versus 1 kilo of bike wheel is quite a big difference. This is the back wheel. And that one is as clean as a whistle. In fact, you'd say that was very, very clean indeed. This is a zoomed in shot of the rim. Now, a lot of the wavy type rims actually have a section that changes in its chord length, but this Aviav wheel doesn't have that. They also sent me this shot here, or this piece here, which is a section through the wheel. So let's just zoom in. So the hooks are here and here. You've got the bed here, and that is where the holes for the spokes are drilled so that you can access them, and then the nipples come through here. Now, in terms of section, you can quite clearly see the profile. I'm just going to move this out of the way. You can quite clearly see the profile runs along here, and it's actually thicker in this section. So it almost looks like the perfect aerofoil, and then that bit is thicker. Now, in terms of how this works, we'll have to go to my new whiteboard. Welcome to Hambini's wank board. Right, if we take a Princeton Carbon Works wavy wheel, the inside of it looks something like that. In the case of the Aviav, let's call that PCW. In the case of the Aviav, it's a constant cross section. However, the principle of how these work is very similar. So if we were to take a kind of like aerofoil, and then we had another aerofoil that had a completely different shallower chord, and then added a little bit of yaw. So let's add a little bit of yaw. So the airflow comes round here, can't stay attached, and then detaches. Bump. Okay, now if we do it on this wheel, that one's much better, you see, because, well, let me draw a bit worse. Two different flow regimes. Now you can characterize that, the flow patterns across them, by something called Reynolds number. So Reynolds number is rho v d over mu. So this is a non-dimensional number. It has no units. Rho is the density of the fluid. So in the case of air, that is 1.225. I don't know what it is in Christian units, but someone out there somewhere can work that out. If you're in water, it'd be 998. Velocity, and this is a tricky one, which I'm going to come back to, and then D, which is characteristic dimension. Normally, you would take that to be the chord length. All right. And then mu is the viscosity of the fluid. Now this V term, which I said I would come to, is a bit of a tricky one in wheel design, because you've got air that's coming in that way. You've also got the rotational speed of the wheel. The two may not necessarily be the same. So for example, if we were to take that and then go at 20 kilometers per hour rotational speed, if you're going through still air, the air hitting it will be 20 kph. However, if you have a slight headwind, you'd have the same rotational speed but a faster free stream velocity. So if we did that, you're going forward at 20 kph, the air is hitting you at 30 kph, the headwind there is 10 kph. So it becomes difficult for when you want this V term. Now if we go back to this, okay, we've got one scenario which is the deeper rim, which is detached, and we've got this one which is the shallower rim, which is still attached at the same yaw angle. This deeper rim causes a few issues. The first is the detachment point is generally sooner, and the second is you've got quite a large area to generate a low pressure on. Low pressure tends to cause instability. So you are riding along and then you get, you generate a pressure difference, and then bang, it collapses, and that is when the wheel starts to shake. So if I was to draw that, let's draw it in a graph. If this is your P, so delta P, pressure differential, and this is T, you're riding along, there's a pressure build up, bang, it collapses, and then you go through this business again, bang, it collapses, bang, it collapses, so on and so forth. And that is effectively instability. This is modeling a perfect scenario. So you have got, it's wind tunnel, so you've got constant speeds and, no street furniture. Street furniture can cause this line to be very, very erratic. So it might do that, bump, might do that, bump. It tends to be quite erratic. Okay, the inclusion of this, the shorter shallower depth is the vortices are generally smaller, so you get the pressure build up, but it's not as high, and then it breaks off more repeatedly. Yeah, so you're getting a lot more smaller vortices. Okay, you might think, well, that's great, we should just have this on all the time. So that takes me back to this business with the Reynolds number. Okay, this here is only valid for a certain Reynolds number. So you've tuned it for the range, you've tuned it for the velocity. And that is where the difficulty arises. If you have no yaw, which is, you know, extremely unlikely, so in an absolute straight line, right, having these sawtooth profiles is not the way to go. You're better off having a constant cross section. The way that the Aviav wheel works, because obviously it's constant section, constant chord length, is it has these flat bits like that, and then the taper, and then in other sections the taper is much longer, but the overall rim depth remains the same, but you're trying to achieve the same thing, so shedding of smaller vortices. In theory, it should also keep the flow attached for longer, but again, I'll refer you back to this. This Reynolds number is the key parameter. Right, it's that time of the show again. Well, I couldn't really do without it, could I? Right, pointer options pen. Let's check the pen's working. It's just childish. Right, fuck me with a weed whacker. So expensive, I fell off my chair. Spelled off wrong because my grammar's not that good. By Hambini, aged 5. It's quite good for a 5-year-old, but we'll carry on. Right, you can hook me up on hambini.com. Remember to like and subscribe. I'm also on Instacrap and Facebonk. And if you want to fund my journalistic career, on Patreon as well. Right, let me show you the Aviav website, Instagram and all that. This is the Aviav website. I take offence at this. Someone's put an American flag there, as if American English is the de facto English. Well, it might be anyway. Right, I digress. This is the stuff in here. I mean, the headline thing, and I keep going on about this, is $3,500 US. It is so expensive. The wheels I've got are, I guess, the iteration 1. Now, when I spoke to them at the booth, which I'll come to, they said that the new one's lighter. So yeah, it's a couple of 100 grams lighter, but the geometry is almost the same. This is all the blurb about the Chevron Kammtail Technology. I'll talk about those results in a second, but it uses Ansys to, you know, check out the aerodynamics of this. Ansys now, looking at the one they use, which is down here somewhere, this Ansys looks like it's a derivative of Fluent. So back when I was a boy, Fluent, probably in the late 90s, was the go-to CFD tool. For a wheel, I actually think Ansys CFX is better because the wheel's rotating. Because looking through these models up here, wherever they are, yeah, these models, it doesn't look like there's any rotation on those wheels. Just looking at the streamlines, it just looks like they're, you know, straight, not rotating. And I can't see any spokes either, but there you go. It does actually show the transition quite well on that picture. This is the Aviav Instagram profile. A lot of this is in Korean, so I think they're probably very popular in Korea. And it just goes through all these things, you know, one by one. This is where they went to a wind tunnel somewhere. So they've done the wheel in isolation, which is always a good one to do, because wheels are always around about the same dimension, so you get a good analysis between wheels, and that is now how I do it too. So there's not really much to comment on there. And then later on in this shot, they put the guy onto the bike and then repeat the process. So there's the bike, and there's a Cannondale System 6, is it maybe? And then the guy on it, oh, he's not pedaling, So, oh, okay, then he starts to pedal. The only comment I would make there is, if I pause that there, the airflow coming in to there isn't particularly straight, just to my naked eye looking at it. But there we go. I'm not really going to argue about Instagram. Instagram's there as a marketing tool. It's not really there to comment on aerodynamics. This is me at Eurobike, so you can view this video. Anyway, this is me just being a yob at the Aviav stand. This is the Oz Cycle. It's the only real review I could find on about it. Now, I wouldn't totally take into account what he says in this because he's known for killing dogs. So, yeah, that's you know, something you should know about him. So, you know, take his opinion as you wish. But one comment he did make, which does seem to stack up, and I'll show you that in a second, is he said the wheel is quite good in crosswinds. So let's look through some of the tech details from this. Right, so if we go through this, there's, I mean, a few bits and pieces. I mean, the first one is the front wheel. The front wheel, the out of balance on it is A, massive, and B, at a weird angle compared to some of the others. The tension on the wheel, the evenness around it wasn't totally great, but the actual deviation was only like 10. So it's not really much in the grand scheme of things. I think you aim for 5%. So it's around about, yeah, it's just over 5. The back wheel, there's not really much to say about the back wheel. I'd say that one was a better wheel. Well made, not really much to say about that one. The hub, now because of this out of balance business, I didn't measure the vibration from the hub, which in hindsight I probably should have done, but never mind. Runouts were fairly low. Now, if I was a cynic, I would almost say these hubs were made by H-Works or used a similar design to H-Works. So, don't know. Don't know if that's pure speculation. Now, when it comes down to here, which is the sweep and front and rear, and the Denitria front and rear, so this is basically your stability. This kind of shows quite clearly that this style of wheel, or whatever they've done, does work, in the sense that if you look at this point around here, it is quite low. So if I bring up another wheel, the 9 Velo CD58 version 2, yeah, if you look at this one, this is the Denitria from that one. If you look at that versus the Aldo, see there's a clear difference. But you should also note that the 9 Velo wheel is considerably faster in a straight line. It's noticeably faster. There are some other little, you know, quirks with this. So this is uncorrected, and the wheel tyre combination on the 9 Velo is slightly better than the Aviav. So yeah, from that. But this concurs with, I guess, what Oz Cycle said. I mean, just in conclusion, the out of balance on a $3,500 wheel set, eek, man, what the hell's all that about? It might be a one-off. I mean, you could let them off and say it's a one-off. There just isn't a huge sample size because the wheels are so expensive. I guess they must be selling them in South Korea, but geez, that is such a lot of money for someone in the West. Personally, I would buy something else for that. Go and buy 2 of something else. Go buy 2 9 Velos or something like that. The Aero has a limited range, so it only functions within a certain Reynolds number. You're either side of that, it's not going to work so well. You generally find, looking at the data, the higher speeds is where it works better. 697 front and 827 rear for the weights. By modern standards, that's not exactly lightweight. I appreciate the newer wheel has dumped a load of weight, but you know, still. The paint job and the carbon build, I would say, are very good. The paint, I think it's laser etched or whatever it is, but it is just, nothing comes off it. And the carbon build, again, looks very good, apart from the gunge that was in the front of the wheel. And then finally, a lot of unknowns still remain. I'm hoping they'll reach out after this, but we will see. Right, that brings us to the end of this show. If you did enjoy it, remember to smash that like button and hit subscribe, because that does help the channel significantly. Yeah, and that's it. As always, keep banging your hairdresser.